Is Dubai going to be oversupplied in 2026 and 2027? If you've read the headlines or bank reports, you'll think there's a massive tidal wave of apartments coming that's going to crush prices for investors. The problem is most of these conclusions are based on announced supply, not actual deliveries. And historically, these two numbers are very different. And I'll explain to you why and how in this video. So firstly, let's talk about announced supply versus delivered supply. Here's the first thing investors need to understand. In Dubai, what gets announced is never what actually gets delivered, at least not on schedule. This is not necessarily a bad thing, and I'll explain why. And by the way, this isn't unique to Dubai. This is a common phenomenon you'll notice in many fast developing cities around the world. If you look at market research and developer data over the last few years, you'll see that in 2024, only about 58% of residential units and projects that were announced for delivery actually completed. That means over 40% were delayed or pushed back. In mid-2025, industry summaries also showed that roughly about 16,500, almost 17,000 units were completed versus what was forecasted, which was closer to about 37,000 for that same period. Again, that's around 60% delivery. I'm not cherry picking data here. You can feel free to go and research it yourself and you'll see the data. It is a consistent pattern. The second thing is, even major developers miss timelines. When you say all of these things to people about deliveries and missed schedules and stuff, people a lot of times will respond, well, sure, what about the big developers? Okay, let's take Emaar. In 2023, Emaar delivered just over about 12,000 units, I believe, while carrying a pipeline that was about 25,000, 26,000 units that were slated for future delivery. That's less than half of what was sitting in their pipeline. And this isn't because Emaar is struggling, far from it. It's because large-scale development doesn't move in a straight line. There are phasing, there are approvals, there are contractor capacity, market timing, all of these things that tie in and matter and has a very distinct influence. Thirdly, why are delays structural and not accidental? This is a part that a lot of people misunderstand. See, delays aren't a sign of a weakness somewhere necessarily. They can and often are structural. And here's a few reasons why. Firstly, things like construction capacity is finite, okay? Secondly, contractors get stretched during boom cycles, which we've been having in Dubai. Thirdly, developers stagger handovers intentionally for various different strategical reasons. Fourthly, off-plan projects dominate sales. And fifth, large master plans are delivered in phases, not bursts. And there are, again, strategical reasons for this. In fact, reports have shown that in 2024, project launches surged by about 80%, while completions fell by more than 20%. So launches went up, but completions went down. And that tells you a lot about what you need to know about how supply actually behaves, especially in Dubai. What this is going to mean for 2026 and 2027 headlines, in my opinion. Let's first address the big scary elephant in the room. You'll see forecasts saying things like 115,000 units are going to hand over in 2026, or 70,000 units are going to hand over by 2027. On paper, that can look very terrifying for investors, but history tells us, as I was mentioning, 30 to 45% of that supply will actually not arrive on time. If Dubai continues delivering at 55 to 62% of announced volumes, then actual supply hitting the market is materially lower than those headlines actually suggest. So oversupply risk is not about what's written in a report, it's about the keys that are actually handed over to owners within a given year. You can announce particular forecasts for supply as much as you like, but we know, and anybody who's an investor watching this knows, that most of the time what you put your money down on in terms of a project is very likely going to be delayed, even for bigger developers. And this matters because the whole oversupply thing obviously is riding on the fact that a lot of apartment units, a lot of villas are going to hit the market all at the same time, and there's not going to be enough of a demand through people coming into Dubai and the UAE to take up this amount of property that is being delivered. Whereas I'm saying that's not going to be the case simply because history repeats itself. Next thing is the demand side. This is the other half of the question that people conveniently ignore. Dubai's population continues to grow. Household formation continues, and new residents don't arrive all at once. They kind of come in gradually. And housing absorption had historically kept pace or lagged slightly behind population growth, not exceeded it. That's why rents have remained resilient, villas have stayed undersupplied, prime apartments continue to absorb inventory. This supply has rarely outrun demand in real terms. In fact, if you've been looking at the headlines recently, you'll see that there's been a problem with a supply of luxury penthouses and apartments. There's not enough. The other thing is that the real mistake investors make is that they're taking raw pipeline data at face value. They assume that all projects deliver on time, or units hit the market simultaneously, and demand kind of stays static. None of that has ever been true in Dubai. It's just not the case. Announcements are intentions. Completions are the reality. And that's what you need to, as an investor, base your future decisions on. So the final takeaway and the conclusion, in my opinion, is this. Are you wrong to think about oversupply? No, of course not. As an investor, you must. But the answer is more nuanced. It's based on historical delivery, and that history tells us that only 55 to 62% of announced units deliver on schedule. It tells us that delays and phasing are the norm. It tells us that actual supply is spread over time. And it tells us that demand continues to build gradually, which means the fear of a dramatic 2026-2027 oversupply is overstated if you rely purely on headline numbers. Smart investors don't react to headlines. They study patterns. A lot of times headlines are sensationalistic, right? And the pattern in Dubai is very clear. If you want help analyzing whether a specific project actually fits into the bigger picture for you, not emotionally, not speculatively, but structurally, that's exactly what I do. Feel free to reach out and I'll be happy to help.